Yeah, let's do that.
Tony Caravan.
You've been subjected to a highly sophisticated form of propaganda.
It's just what you need, and not what you don't. Quality, quantity, and variety.
Rock Flux.
Let's get this show on the road.
And welcome again. July 27, calendar year 2021. You're listening to Tony Caravan Live, and if you don't like me saying that,
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
we could bring in somebody else. Gone back to a little more subtle tint. We're going to be clearing the throat today. Today's title card, well, the title of the show today is All Our Times Have Come. And on the title card, you will notice it's a frickin' disaster, man. Any day now, the morning show. And that's what we're going to talk about today. You know, that's what we're going to talk about today. But before I get into that, I'm going to show you an image. There's this guy named Velikovsky back in the, I guess it was the 50s, more or less. Of course, they just made a B movie about it, you know, based on his concept. If you ever saw When Worlds Collide, it's not a bad B sci-fi movie, to tell you the truth, but I'm still using the metal mug beer stein, which is already showing radiation sickness. You could see the morning show mug as I lifted up the When Worlds Collide poster. Still exists. I have new ones now. And, you know, it's one of these shows, so, you know, I can show you what I have. We have some new images of things that we're offering the world. And they are Rockfluxcom. I didn't check this morning, but my Rockflux.com website should be forwarding now to Tony Caravan Live. And, you know, you could also get one of these hoodies or you get that logo on a t-shirt, kind of one of those cloth tote bags you take shopping, even on stickers and a couple other items. Men and women, all sizes, some various colors. If you go to TonyCaravanLive.com and click on the girl, you will find this stuff. And you'll say, what is the significance of this? You know, I don't get it, right? I don't understand. There's something weird about this, something weird about you. What's with the lightning bolt through the earth and rock flux? Well, you understand what the word flux is, and why am I playing with this movie thing? Well, those of you listening to this show,
you're now in a different continuum than the world you're used to.
And that goes without saying.
You have actually opened the door to another dimension?
And you'll be wishing that. And it's possible. So we're going to go into the world of the impossible today.
Your papers, please.
While other people play around with that, we'll be more or less going.
All your life you will remember this night.
You know, we'll be playing with that kind of thing. It says a garbage day. I got a notification. Garbage day in 58 minutes. Hey, I put 2.5 bags of garbage out yesterday. Man, did I have the trash. For those of you who are regulars to this show, the Tony Caravan Live show, we're going to take care of some of the usual business. First of all, I want to show you one of the bizarrities here. You see these things, domain registry, domain name expiration notice, okay? Comes in a fancy schmancy domain registry thing. And of course, they're like charging you ridiculous amounts of money, you know. One on GoDaddy you could pay, well, it's up to $90 now, but I mean, look at $90 for 2 years, you know. And, you know, people fall for this stuff. Individuals and companies, you know, they send this stuff and you get somebody in, you know, accounts payable department and they just pay it. Or somebody else who has their own website. And then that's the beginning of the end. Because who knows, not only did they take your $90 or $160, whatever the hell you got screwed over by, but then they've got control of you and your stuff. But that's not really the whole main thing here. The amazing story of the end of the world, when worlds collide. Now again, this is just a movie, okay? This is just a movie. Let's not deal with it on that level just at this juncture. Because it's not a movie. It's the story of your life. It's the story of the end of the world, not this movie. What's going on right now? And sure enough, as always, my chair has sunken down to the ground. It's 7:04 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. This is like, is this the latest we ever began this show? Stomach's bothering me a little bit. I had a breakfast and I had this drink. The problem is I noticed in my blood test analysis I checked yesterday that some like AST and some other numbers were, I decided to look them up just for the sake of it. And it was like, you know, they were like off the charts. Like, you know, like the highest it should be would be like 5 or something. And I had like 600. And they were all like liver related. Like you got a bad, like your liver's ready to stop functioning. I haven't been drinking that much. I mean, I've had a few beers. Gallbladder. I don't know. I guess I got something. I don't know. Maybe I won't make it to the end of the world. That would be kind of sucky. I would like to make it to the end of the world. Do they have a Make-A-Wish type of thing where I could make a wish for that? You know, that would be nice. Like a Make-A-Wish Foundation for adults. Do they have one of those? You know? It's like in the movie Animal Farm where that kid's like in his bedroom reading Playboy magazine, right? And the girl gets thrown off the float. You know, the girl in like the bikini or whatever, the Playboy bunny ears and stuff. He was reading like Playboy magazine. And he says, "Thank you, God." Make-A-Wish Foundation for adults. I want that, you know, or that. I noticed that this world within a world, a mirror within a mirror within a mirror. See, when I go like this to say I want that, it probably is correct. But for me, she's over there. Very weird, these humans. I wanted to talk about two things. One, the idiocy of people. By the way, here's a picture I snagged off Facebook from Trey Fergus's account. This was from the 25th, so this is 2 days ago. Today's the 27th, by the way. July's been a pretty long month. How about it? We still got plenty of time to go. Another weekend in July, which is really like, I remember when in the working days when you were looking for a paycheck. This month actually had 5 full pay periods, if you get paid weekly, but if you're, bi-weekly or whatever. But 5 weekends too. So for bars, if you were in the bar business, in the old days, because now I don't know how bar business is now. I don't think it's as good as it was. 5 weekends. Sometimes you get really screwed. It just depends on the lay, like where the numbers fall, But this is like a near perfect thing, because even for payroll, some people get paid on a Thursday, and the first was a Thursday, so it's like 5 pay period. Thursday or Friday, 5 pay periods. But yeah, a full month. July's a full month. It seems, which is nice. It's summer and all that stuff. And we look at the sun here, which appears, whitish. When the sun's lower in the sky, you still get that yellowish sun. And there's a number of factors that have to do with that, based on it being that close to the horizon and, various reflections. In other words, the absence of yellow is what makes the color yellow come out. The way I understand it, or any color like that. It's not like the presence of it. But as we all know that lately when you see the sun in its full glory up in the sky, it's kind of white. And so the old yellow sun that we grew up with just doesn't seem to be there anymore. But it's because the sun has changed. And like my new logo, Rockflux, and I put the .com on there just so people are clear. So go to the website. Rock, the third rock from the sun, as it is referred to often. I think they even had a TV show said that once. But I mean, it's an old thing, it's a rocky planet, as opposed to a gaseous planet or a star or a moon. So this rock is in a state of flux right now. Our magnetic field is weakening, and we're having all sorts of planetary disruptions based upon that and the activity of our star, which is the sun, or soul, as some refer to it. Therefore, we call it the solar system. But, when you look at this, and I've had these shows where I talked about the beauty of nature and all that stuff, and how people are, all the craziness in the world that goes on, and all the idiocy among people, and how they've converted people into functionally illiterates and all that jazz. But we still have the beauty of nature and stuff like that. But now more than ever, you really should embrace this and enjoy this, because we don't know how much longer we're going to have it. those oceans will become a killing machine. That star, that beautiful sun in the sky, will become a killing machine. Those clouds will be part of a killing machine. Everything we've come to know to be beautiful about this planet, this so-called solar system, is about to turn on us as we enter this 25-year or 12,000-year cycle. And in the blink of an eye, it's gone. And then this is what follows. And you know the funny thing about this, I mean, none of this stuff is really funny. But the funny thing, one thing that could be thought of as funny, you know, in a maybe almost an ironic way, is that this fear that people have based upon the thing, you know, you still can't talk about, and that they're just dragging on. That fear should be about this, not the thing. In other words, in levels of intensity and affecting 8 billion people on the planet, sometimes people forget that. You know, it's hard when people look at numbers, you know. People are easily frightened by the media and politicians because that's their job. That's what the media does. They sensationalize. And politicians create issues or pick up on things or latch upon things in order to frighten people. Because when people are frightened, they're basically out of kilter. Their minds are more susceptible to things. They act irrationally. They accept commands. You see? And this is what people are. But then when something like this happens, like, well, frickin' forget it, man. But there's more truth down here in my title card, as I call them, for this show, than in anything you've heard over the past several years. Even when I talk about corporatocracy and the Davos set being this organized crime syndicate and all that stuff, it pales in comparison to what's about to unfold. And in fact, it's already unfolding. And people just don't understand it. They just don't deal with it. You know?
This is a nightmare. Must be a nightmare.
It is a nightmare. It is a nightmare. We're living through a nightmare. All of us. And that nightmare is going to get worse and worse and has nothing to do with worrying about the things that the media and the politicians are telling you. Because they're lying.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Well, in this instance, our buddy Roosevelt's wrong.
It's an excursion into the odd and into the very, very different.
It's beyond that. It's way beyond that. Way, 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 way beyond that. And we're past the point of no return because it's not man-made. We have nothing to do with it. It's born in the clockwork of the universe, of our galaxy, of our solar system, how things work, the mysteries that we can't even begin to comprehend, the cycles, the great cycles. And it is time now. It is a 12,000-year cycle has begun. Now you may sit there and think this is some kind of game and say,
I fear no evil.
But the thing is, it's not evil. It's nature. It's what's happening.
Why are you telling us this?
Because you need to know, and not many other people are telling you this. And the people who are telling you this are anything but mainstream. I watched a little, because yesterday I was criticizing Joe Rogan. And I don't like to criticize people unless that's based in fact. And so I went back and I watched a recent Joe Rogan, I don't know, a fairly long, maybe 15, 20 minutes of a Joe Rogan show. And he was talking about UFOs with someone and why the military, the question was. And I'll tell you, Joe Rogan, man, does he look, he's really weathered. He was either in some UFC fight or whatever they call that stuff, WW, whatever. And got the shit beat out of his face or something. But man, does he look that? For a while there, he used to look like Joe Garagiola, if you're old enough to remember him. Joe Garagiola. Look at Joe Rogan's face and then think of Joe Garagiola. Like when he's not wearing a hat. But anyway, even in that discussion about UFOs, it was still, they weren't going to the idea of, I guess you can't expect certain people to go to where I'm going to. And that's why this show's different and unique and stuff. They just didn't go where I'm going to take you. I mean, the question obviously everyone asks and has been asked is why has suddenly the Pentagon and the Navy and all this stuff, decided at this juncture that they would bring this information out. Okay. And that's, obviously that's a fair, reasonable question. But, it's very low on the list of questions. I guess one of many, but it's low on the list. Because the thing is, whether or not the UFOs existed or not was never a question. It's like when Larry King did a show one time. I may have mentioned this a long time ago on a show, but it's just in the back of my mind that I remember talking about it. When Larry King was ending his like last shows when he was on CNN, then he moved to RT before he died. But when he was on CNN, and he was like one of the nighttime guys, that was the show. And it was a big deal. Larry King interview, right? It was like an Oprah thing. You see, I call Joe Rogan the Oprah for wimpy guys. But Larry King was like was that talk show for the, was considered the respectable. If you were on a Larry King show, got an you were somebody, right? And so in his last week or two, I forget how it was exactly. I wasn't like a Larry King viewer. I was a CNN viewer. You know, in those days, I did have television, so I would flip around. I mean, I used to like when Headline News was Headline News, and they had that one girl who I thought was kind of semi-hot, or at least she was interesting. She used to have this, she broadcast, when she came on like around at 7 at night or something, she wasn't on the main set. It was like she was in this little dark room. You know, it's not like if you think my room is dark, you know, she was broadcasting from something. Well, I still have light. See, it's so the lights out. My window's on the side where my face is lit up. But she was, you know, it was dark. But, you know, it was Headline News was you pretty much got every 15 minutes or 15, 20 minutes or something, you know, you knew you could go to CNN Headline News and find out what's going on now. Now they have the CNN, the Headline News channel that still remains on cable TV. I don't know why they didn't take it off. Because it's not Headline News. It's just like shows, you know, CNN stuff. But I mean, it's not, you know, it's not like Headline News every 15 minutes repeating. You know, so you could always know that there was a news source. Yeah, that's how CNN made its name, and that was Ted Turner's thing. You know, he invented that whole concept, whether you like the guy or not, of cable TV, you know. But, you know, it's very hard to go anywhere right now except radio in some major markets because it's hard to find it elsewhere. Like this morning, I asked my voice assistant to play BBC World News. And I was in hope that I would get like some BBC World News just short update of what's going on in the world, right? And instead what they do is that she just broke into the BBC feed. I mean, this is how these things work. It's pretty fascinating how they're set up. So in effect, if you have one of these Echo Dot type of things, it's especially I think it's the third generation one, the one that looks like more like a ball than a hockey puck. She just broke into the feed and it was some BBC, but it was in the middle of an interview about some woman who wrote some book about some kind of thing. So it's like, you know, it's virtually impossible, but not totally impossible. But I mean, virtually. Virtually is the wrong word because we use that for other reasons today. In the past, it meant something different. It's practically or, you know, mostly impossible to be able to get a capsulized version of an unbiased, no commentary breakdown of what's going on in the world, you know, in 10 or 15 minutes. Right? Right. Except, like I say, I don't know if they still do it, but there used to be a station, I think it was KYW in Philadelphia or something like that. You give us 10 minutes, we'll give you the world or something weird like that. I don't know. And the whole idea was that you if you wanted to know what was going on, you tune into this station because you wouldn't even consider it was a news station, not talk, you know, because that's a different thing. Some stations are news and talk, right? But this was news radio, right? And you don't have news, anything, you know, anymore necessarily for the masses. Everybody's got an opinion. That's why with this show I try not to opine. I mean, even though you'll say, well, you talk about, you know, the unorganized crime syndicate and a corporatocracy. That's not an opinion. That's a fact from a guy who's been involved in things and seen this firsthand and knows what he's talking about. Right? But I'm not a news program and I don't portend to be that. All right. But I am a show in which I do bring you the truth. And I always back that truth up with actual things that you can, confirm independently. But anyway, so Larry King, getting back to Larry King, he had this show, and it was, I guess what he was doing was his last week or weeks, I don't know how it was set up exactly, to tell you the truth. But the idea was these were the shows I always wanted to do over the years. And I guess what he meant, but, the powers that be at the station, the editors and producers or whatever, certain topics were, off limits. Or that weren't, would have in his mind maybe soiled the name, the integrity of the Larry King show, right? Being his ultimate interview. And so one of his shows in that last week or weeks, I forget, like I said, I wasn't a regular fan of TV ever, but I did have broadcast TV. Now I don't. But I remember tuning into that or passing through it, not even looking forward, but it just happened. And these things happen in life. It's, these weird concurrences that just happen, kismet, whatever, things, things that just happen and you go like, why, but nonetheless. Still ice in my, I think the metal, it's not stainless steel. Is it pewter? Or whatever it is, might be acting somewhat like a Faraday cage to keep the electromagnetic radiation from melting the ice. Which means that, the device I've shown people on previous shows, which is over here. This is an interesting show, and this show may go down in history, so I might as well. Let me get rid of this thing for a second. Not the Rockflux logo, the title card. Okay, so this is if we can focus on here. If you look very closely, you'd have to be watching this on a TV, which that's how I watch YouTube. And there's a line underneath with a screen, so to speak, that says electromagnetic radiation tester. It's very hard. It's hard to see it exactly, but you can see it just so you understand. And this is a scientific device, There's nothing at the sides. It just has some grips, and it's got your usual, stuff. It takes a battery. All right. And then there's a power switch. So I'm going to hold this up and press the power switch on. Okay. And point it at my computer. So it's powering up. And as I point it at the computer, that is giving me a reading of that it's harmful. Electromagnetic radiation, harmful radiation. And I do this all the time, but for people, nobody watches this show. But this shows, I'm going to lay out some important things. So you can see that the harmful radiation is coming from this computer. I could face it down. It's this whole area because I have a whole computing system here. Now, when I go over here, you see, no, stops beeping. But as I turn it back to the computer, harmful radiation. Turn it over towards the wall, it goes off. Towards the computer, and just try to flip this around. Now over there is a window. See, it's just a window. Back towards the computer systems, harmful electromagnetic radiation. And I point it down because I have computers, at the base as well as straight on. Yeah. Electromagnetic radiation tester. This is a scientific instrument. You know, for laboratory use. I wonder why I got these pains in my stomach and my things are off the chart. I had cancer operation 1.5 years ago. So I do these shows and write these books like Codex back there. I just have a very subtle tint today, but enough to give you can see that there's a reddish tint of Codex, and you can almost see the greenish tint on my old 1960s telephone. And you get a good view of the time travel image and everything. The old tube radio, AM radio. Speaking of radio. So Larry King decided one of these shows he was going to bring on, talk about the UFO phenomenon. Now, this is like 25 years ago. You know, somewhere in that time range. Okay? It's got to be. 20 years ago or something like that. I don't know. Let me just verify. New window. It may not be that long. So I don't want to like give you false information. When did Larry King retire from CNN? In 2010, King announced his decision to retire. So it's only 11 years ago. When did Larry King leave CNN? June 2010. Okay. So yeah. So this is only, I don't know why I was thinking it was longer than that, but still, okay. So it's like, you know, as of now, it'd be like 11 years ago. For half, you know, so that last week, he did a UFO show, among other things. I don't know what else he did, because like I say, this was happenstance. And so he had like George Nori was on there. And I remember talking about this once. He put George Nori put a little bit, the Just for Men on a little bit too dark that day. And so he was like Groucho too. Well, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. But you know, George Nori, and then he had that guy. He was a UFO. I don't know if he's still alive, but was it Friedman? What was his name? Let me just double check this too. Stanton Friedman. And let's see if he's still alive. No, he died in 2019 at 84 years old. Put a picture of Stanton Friedman up because, you know, he was he brought a lot to that movement. Let me see. I've got some images here that we don't really need to see. Image 4. Bear with me here. It's only take a couple of seconds. I just got to replace an image. What I'm going to do is I'm going to replace this space junk image. Can you see that? That's that ESA space junk. It's what the Earth really looks like from space. So in effect, we've already pretty much, you know, it's pretty scary. But anyway, all those satellites, a lot of it's space junk, literally is junk, but it's a lot of satellites. And this is going to play into today's show, because when we get hit by that solar outburst, and then the subsequent, this dust cloud that comes off the sun. At that point, all those satellites will be destroyed. And let me put him in a different folder so when I browse here. Okay. This will all make sense. This is the kind of stuff that, that Rogan should have talked about. And, in a long form show, it's not like he didn't have time. He didn't have time to do this. This is like a CMYK photo, so that's one of the reasons why it looks the way it does. Now, of course, on these types of photos, I can clean this up for our sake. Take some of the saturation out. I don't want to overly brighten it. But that's better. That's better picture. Anyway, so that's Stanton Friedman. And of course, if you don't know who George Nori is, George Nori is the guy who hosts Coast to Coast, right? So he's in the legacy of Art Bell, right? Who invented the format. Basically, that nighttime thing about all the strange and unusual things. Well, Stanton Friedman has an interesting background. He actually was a physicist, a degreed man. But he was the guy that most ufologists over the years, his name was synonymous with it. And he was almost the face of it for many years. And so Stanton was on the show. George Nori was on the show because at the time, Coast to Coast would have a lot of UFO stories on. And then there was an astronaut was on. One of the Apollo astronauts. And for the life of me, I forget which one it was. But, because most of them have come out and they've all talked about UFOs or seeing UFOs and weird stuff, right? And many of the originals, passed on since. And you could go down that rabbit hole yourself and you could find videos and interviews with them. But the thing was, so Nori was talking about stuff and he had the background from having interviewed so many people. I think there was only 3 people, but there might have been a 4th. I don't know. Like I said, this is, as we know, 11 years ago, 10, 11 years ago. But Friedman was trying to say things, Stanton here. And Larry King wasn't taking him serious enough. But when the astronaut, he goes, but this is an astronaut says this. It's that astronaut, had one experience, or whatever. And it's great, and he's an astronaut. But, Larry King coming from that generation of the astronauts, hero type of idea. But, the astronaut technically, as far as UFO, the UFO movement, ufology, UFO research is concerned, Stan Friedman was light years beyond any astronaut because the amount of information he had, and the research he had done over a lifetime, was just incredible. Stanton Friedman, man. I'm glad I found that photo and I could put that up and tribute that. I didn't realize he died. Yeah, he was a great guy. You know, and he was ridiculed. Guys like him were ridiculed their whole life. And this is a thing that they didn't talk about, like I noticed on Rogan. In other words, the idea that these people were all were all considered wackos and conspiracy theorists. All right. And, you know, unfortunately, Stanton here never lived to be, you know, to be acknowledged that he was right all along. That's sad. You know, it's sad when you see that. So that someone who was, you know, that a brilliant mind like Stanton Friedman, a great researcher, you know, he openly admitted, you know, he wasn't 100% right about everything. And a couple, you know, guys like that sometimes are victims of, and the same with like Coast to Coast shows. And I remember even Art Bell, I talked about this one time. You know, you get these callers would call in and they were, you know, I don't know, it's some kind of psychological thing, you know, I don't know, personality disorder of some sort. You'd have to talk to somebody, you know, a psychiatrist about that, what it is that makes someone get so caught up into something that they want to be, that they want to call in, that they can actually break into tears and sound like they're in fear for their life. When in reality, the story they're telling is completely manufactured in their head. You know, and Art Bell used to get calls like that, like these people used to call, and it would sound like, you know, and the guy, you know, and you just knew, and I think most people who would listen to Bell and even Coast to Coast, you know, you could kind of spot those type of people. Or worse, you wouldn't know the truth if a person was really threatened for their life or not, because you would get these, you know, like I say, and it's a time in the, you know, it's the end of the frickin' world, so it doesn't really matter. So like we will avoid worrying about stuff. These psychos that would call in. And I think Stanton was the, you know, the victim once or twice of, you know, receiving some documents or things like that. By people. But, you know, in the grand scheme of everything he's ever done, reported on, talked about, and spoken all over the world, and definitely throughout the United States and all the conferences, Friedman goes down as one of, you know, there should be a statue. You know, like I always say, sometimes we have like, we elevate the wrong people in this society. I think that's like a lyric in one of my beat poetry songs. You know, sometimes we elevate the wrong people. And it's like, you know, there's a guy that, you know, on CNN, they should have covered his death, you know. But instead, he died as being some lunatic fringe, conspiracy theorist UFO guy. Except among people like me and other people, obviously Coast to Coast fans, though half the Coast to Coast fans are just like people who get a thrill out of riding a roller coaster or getting, you know, going into a haunted house, want to be scared. It's like I always say, like people that like a bang, fireworks and stuff like that. You know, they're just thrill seekers or whatever. As opposed to the real deal. And Friedman was one of those guys. But, you know, so this was 10 years ago, you know, where King was covering this thing. And sadly enough, like I say, he kind of disrespected Stanton on that show. But I mean, at least he had the decency, you know, he at least did the show, you know, covered it. So in that regards, you know, hats off to King. So that's a little bit of background, you know. Sometimes you got to lay the framework for these long form shows. Excuse me. So it says any day now on this title card. And we see these buildings. You know, in this instance, this was based upon, like I say, sensationalizing when worlds collide. Okay, and the idea, it was this was a B movie. And what we're talking about is not a collision of worlds, but in effect, this is talking about what's going to happen with the sun. All right. The sun is basically going to nova, and it's going to expel its outer shell. The earth is going to stop moving. That's going to cause, what's real here is going to cause massive tsunamis to pour over the continents. The earth, when the earth is stopped, that side will be baked, and everyone will basically be disintegrated from, like in a B movie. The atmosphere will have to compensate eventually when the earth starts spinning in the opposite direction, and there'll be a pole flip amidst all this stuff. The earth may well tilt and, do some kind of, that sort of thing. There'll be earthquakes of the magnitude that you cannot even imagine. Like, I have to laugh. And again, it's not so much a laugh, but there's like people that cover earthquakes. And they say, oh, there was a 4.7, there was a 5.5, there was this, 6.0. People have stolen so much stuff from me over the years. I had a site over 20 years ago, website. And I used to have I used to basically take the feeds from the various solar satellites that are pointed at the sun. They were on my page. And now there's other people that do that. But I did that. So you could see what the sun looked at any given time from one of these, satellites. I manually used to do this because I used to sift through the earthquakes. And I would list every day. I would do this. This is what I did. I think about this. But I would only list earthquakes that were 6.0 or greater, right? And I watch these people have daily YouTube things, and they're like, there was an earthquake, and it was like... And just even the 6.0 is no big deal, because there's a lot of 6+ earthquakes every year. So it was the 7s that I was really interested in. And every year there are 7s, and there are even 8s, I think Fukushima was like a 9, wasn't it? And I would cover all of these things because remember, I was part back in 1999 or 98, that Yahoo group I told you about was like the Earth Changes. Because there were many of us who were into this stuff 20 some years ago. Now, I've been into this stuff most of my life. It's the same as showing that picture of Stanton Friedman. It's like, before the internet, it's hard for people to understand. Before the internet, many of us, there were things called libraries, there were books, there were magazines, there were journals, there were newsletters, there were conferences, and people today don't understand that. They think everything's on, well, if it's not on this stupid thing, right, one of these devices, right, how did people, like I talked about in like the Encyclopedia Britannica and stuff, and how they even used to send out annual updates and Science and the Future editions and different stuff like that. But, we were, and then there was like, over the years there were magazines, like there was, Omni magazine was there. There were magazines that took these topics seriously. And then even some other magazines, certain magazines that covered scientific topics would occasionally have, would at least cover, astrophysics, and solar events and things of that nature, so that you can understand these things. And then of course there were authors out there, serious authors, not just fictional authors, like what I'm, that basically wrote books, and chronicled things. And I brought that up in a previous show. I think it was forget who it was. I don't want to name a name and get the name wrong, but I have a couple of books. Unfortunately, my library's upstairs, and my bedroom is where I kind of live my life. That's where my chair is, my big screen, and my bookshelf that I have, books that are the books, I have a good collection of books up there. There's no reason to put them down here because I don't spend much time down here. This is like the studio room. Anyway. So many of us have been aware of this stuff for many, many years. Many years. Going back decades and decades. And so, and it's like suddenly people like Stan Friedman are vindicated, but unfortunately not alive to be vindicated. And many others as well. People who have died mysteriously and, or suicided, all that kind of stuff. Crazy stuff goes on, It's like I broke down and I watched this Tom Clancy thing the other day. The latest one on Amazon Prime. I wouldn't say it was up to par with, with many of the other ones, but it still had, it had its moments, You got to remember, like I say, Clancy gets his information from, bureaucrats in the alphabet agencies. I mean, that's, basically it's their way of releasing some kind of information. And, he's allowed to say so many things, but in reality, as I always say, is 10 or 100 times more worse than these dramas. Because I've said this yesterday, but this show is a standalone show, is that the problem with their shows is that they usually show that they use the word bad, like there's a bad apple or something. Somewhere in one of the alphabet agencies or government or something like that. And then that person is, caught or, redeemed or some weird thing like that. But they never talk about how that it's not, that there's not, these aren't aberrations, that it's inherent within these alphabet agencies. And what they do is unbelievable. But so what, right? I mean, that's just a reality that people like me have known. Like I said, I lived and worked in Capitol Hill for a few years, so I have some firsthand experience there. And I've been all over the world, and I've been in all the major markets. Mainly New York and LA, but also Philadelphia. And, lived and worked, got to know people. So suddenly, So let's get into this tale. And this, as we approach the second hour here. We've always had these shows, going back to, the Twilight Zone, for example.
Hey, you're Forbes and Harrington, ain't you? Ain't you the guys that was up in space?
Yeah, but we can still buy a couple of beers for 30 cents Earth money.
Hey, you bet your life, but your money's no good here. The drinks are in the house. I don't get to serve many celebrities. Now drink up, boys.
Thanks.
I don't even care that you cracked up the ship. And I'm a taxpayer.
Say, what's it like up there in outer space?
Well, it's like way out.
Like way out. But going back to the Twilight Zone and of course the Outer Limits, we've always had that kind of stuff. And I like I say, there was guys like Emmanuel Velikovsky and these B-movie type of things that came out after that kind of stuff that were, like When Worlds Collide. And you can go back to the 1800s, and all that, all with great writers over the years, this, science fiction writers, But, that was fiction. And of course there was amazing stories and all those, these pulp books and magazines and even comic books, and where superheroes originally, the whole DC comics and Marvel comics and stuff, a lot of those books and superheroes were always, they always dealt, there was always a touch of alien in there. I mean, Superman, Supergirl, whatever. I mean, they were all aliens, basically, from different planets. But so anyway, so now we have, this acknowledgement by the government that UFOs are real. So something that has been denied, basically, since Roswell, In fact, the last time, it was reported, it happened. Oh, no, it didn't happen. And no, this was actually like aluminum foil or something. Weather balloon and dummies. So you're left with this idea is you don't know what to believe. Like I say, one of my shirts, you don't know what you don't know. And like you see that's a shirt. You can't tell it's a shirt, but in the upper part of the screen, it says everything you know is wrong. And that's pretty much where we are, because we don't know. You don't know what you don't know. And so they release a little bit of information. Some other insiders are saying, yeah, they got high resolution stuff, but they don't want to admit and show their technology. It's like this national security stuff. And my answer to that was another Joe Rogan thing where he failed because, he had the opportunity in this interview he was having because it was brought up about, reading license plates. And he's such a dope. People think, oh, he knows a lot. And he was saying, well, the conversation went into the point, well, the government doesn't want people to know that they can read license plates from space. He actually said, that was like part of the conversation went there. And I just look back and go, and I was starting to get ready to turn this thing off. But like I say, I don't like to make a judgment about something or talk about an individual, because it's been based on the fact that I used to watch him, and this is what my interpretation and what I've gleaned from having watched him. But I thought I'd go back and give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he's changed. Maybe he's doing something different. But no, it's the same old thing. Now you're telling me, okay, so he's not aware. We've been able to read license plates with satellites, spy satellites, for decades now. That's already public knowledge. It's not national security. But like he was like pretending as if, well, the reason they don't want to. The clarity of satellite view right now is beyond anybody's wildest imagination what they can see from space. Besides, most of these satellites, these are in low Earth orbit. It's not like they're really in space, right? That's another thing people don't realize, right? And they could read the date on a dime, man. It's like I try to tell you about all these events that go on around the world. We have live satellite images that in real time can show what's going on anywhere. It's public knowledge. They've even allowed guys like Tom Clancy and various other movie writers, directors, producers, and television shows that have come out. They've allowed them to do that, to put that information out as well. You have to understand, they fund half of these things. That's the only reason you see. How do you think they get that equipment? You know? You know, when you see these movies and you see these shows, and there's all these tanks and Hummers and military gear and tents, and everybody's got the uniforms, and everybody's got all these weaponries, and these jets come, you know, jetting by, right? Or it's some naval thing, and there's these battleships and cruisers or submarines and stuff. You think that's all CGI? The explosions and weird special effects are CGI. But the actual equipment is supplied by the Pentagon. This is his whole idea to glamorize the military and the military industrial complex, right? This idea of selling war. And so instead of Patton, was it Patton who said war is hell, you know, who patented that phrase. It's the idea is, you know, yeah, war sucks, but it's, you know, it's heroic and it's great and it's glorious. And I know, you know, and look, people who serve, don't think I'm being disrespectful. I'm not talking about the individuals. I'm talking about the people who don't care about those people in uniform. The people who just want to sell more bombs and ammunition. The military industrial complex. The people, the Davos set, the ruling elite that basically are an organized crime syndicate. They don't care about what side. They're selling weapons to both sides, right? They're selling weapons that injure U.S. soldiers, basically. You know, that's just how it is. That's what goes on. But this isn't about that. So that was another thing about that clip I watched yesterday, and just disappointing about, you know, where you could take a serious topic. And I know me having this title card up, you know, just, you know, and there's 0 views right now. So this view is being like, this thing is being totally hidden. Totally hidden. There's like 0, there has been nobody watching this thing. Right? You're telling me out of hundreds of millions of people worldwide at this time of day, okay? And like in the U.S. where nobody's even working, and there's that whole thing on YouTube, like live, that not a single person is going to see that thing and just push on it out of curiosity. Yeah. And I haven't even gotten into the real meat of the matter yet. So, what's really going on? That's the question. Now, we know, and I say we, I mean those of us who are in the know, have a high confidence, all right? Believe there's a high probability, all right? You can never be 100% certain about anything. There are always variables, okay? But we have high confidence in the fact that we are in the 12,000-year cycle, which has been documented through archaeology and ice core samples, and even tree rings, and fossilized thing. I mean, just like so many ways, things that have, like I talked, even woolly mammoths frozen in ice and stuff like that. Okay. Things buried. And the current activity of what's going on with the magnetic fields and the activity of the sun and what's affecting Earth. We have a high confidence is high that the 12,000-year cycle of this Earth catastrophe, which will be a near extinction event, meaning that of the 8 billion people, it's close to 8 billion people on the planet right now, that of that 8 billion people, very few will survive. Maybe as few as thousands. Right? Maybe globally 1 million or something like that, perhaps. We know in the past there's been a bottleneck where only 6,000 people survived. You don't hear, that's a factoid based upon study of DNA and things like that. But anyway, so confidence is high that we're in that 12,000 year period of this cycle that has happened every 12,000 years. And it's a Earth catastrophe of the kind that you cannot imagine, and no B movie, why I chose this title card. No B movie can even come close to detailing how horrific this event will be. Chances are you and nobody you know will survive this. I mean, there's no way I can survive it. I live in a 100-year-old house. And even though I'm in the mid-Atlantic states and farther away from the West Coast, so that tsunami, by the time it gets towards the east, may have dwindled down. There'll be massive earthquakes, upheavals of land, volcanic activity, and even for people on the eastern part of North America, we have the Great Lakes, which will spill over. And so we don't know where that water is going to go. And those Great Lakes are like seas, inland seas almost. If you take the combined volume of water, topple that with mountain ranges, and this constant shaking. And then the idea that there's a flash, the last time this occurred, then there's a flash freezing of everything. So the government, years ago created up in Svalbard a seed vault, right? Because they've known about this thing for 50s and since the 60s. And over the past several decades, they've been building these underground shelters for the ruling elite, continuity of government type of things. So places where they could survive. DARPA currently has a project, a contest that's about to end, offering some like millions, some dollars or whatever, just for the award, not for, to produce the thing, but, for the person that comes up with, a person or company that comes up with some sort of robotic device that it will be able to bore through the ice and open up the doors to these, what will be buried under deep ice shelters, to let these ruling elite continuity of government types, to let them out. And that's actually going on now. So, this is, that alone should scare you. That they're, and so you have to wonder why, because I've always said, why are they, doing this thing right now, with, why are they lying to us so much about everything? Why are they scaring the death out of people? And is this a thing? Are they scaring the death out of people? Or are they somehow planning to, has all this been a dry run, a test run? And are they actually planning to basically take out most of us? And just a quick aside. I had this picture up yesterday. But remember that the planet will survive, and always has. And this whole idea of this sidetracking with CO2, that's what those rolling hills and those trees, they breathe. And 0.004% CO2 is like, they're flourishing on that. And that's how crops grow and all that stuff. And with or without humans, they'll, we're not harming them. We obviously, forests are growing, things are greener than you can imagine. You should see my backyard. Growth, this is a great growth year, by the way. So for all the nonsense that, they've been spewing out through the media and through this Davos set and World Economic Forum and all these idiots, Kerry, it just doesn't, it's one of those things, they literally can't see the forest for the trees, people listening to these people, because it doesn't jibe, right, with reality. Reality is the planet is doing just fine. And then there's these people saying, yeah, but what about all these floods in Europe and all that in China and stuff? And forest fires. Well, I've been through that. They happen all the time. Okay? That's the cycles of nature. That's how it works. And events get worse when you have higher densities of populations and people building in areas where hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods naturally occurred. But you just keep getting higher concentrations of people, and so things get worse. And then people don't plan on cyclical events. And that's the problem. problem 43. All right. Is the idea that, the storm of the century or the 30-year flood or the Dust Bowl, whatever, goes forgotten. It's like down in New Orleans, right? So they had this hurricane, in my lifetime, right? Total destruction. And so what did they do? They come in, they bring the Army Corps of Engineers, and they fix the levees, and they rebuild a bunch of stick houses with 2x4s. Basically square, rectangular homes. Nothing that can withstand 400-mile winds, nothing that can stand, 8-foot, storm surge. No new kind of, I remember there was one guy said it best. It was some Wall Streeter said, probably what will happen now is like what New Orleans will become like a futuristic city. This city built upon, not like pylons, but like, city built up high and totally modernized with monorails and out of like the World's Fair, some sci-fi city. But didn't happen. Instead, they just built a bunch of hammer and nail buildings and just shored up some levees. And so when the next one hits, guess what? The same thing will happen. So that's my answer to people who talk about that stuff. It's the same as with forest fires, right? Lightning strikes, And if you don't manage forests, if you don't clean up the brush, take the lower branches down, the kindling and all that stuff, build in fire access roads, not have the power lines. Sometimes power companies openly admit that it was caused by power lines and trees. And so forget about all that nonsense. And you may have an argument for all that, but I don't buy it. Well, yeah, but in Europe is old and, Yeah, well, shit happens, man. And, we have a weakening magnetic field and nobody's listening. And our weather patterns have everything to do with the sun and nothing to do with 0.004 CO2. And if Angela Merkel wasn't so concerned about the Paris Accord or whatever, maybe they could have prepared, for these kinds of events. See, the best minds are not open. We cut corners in building over the past several decades. Even the great German engineers, which I always elevate to the highest in the world, saying German engineering is second to none, are retired. Didn't Germany bring in the most immigrants of all? And these were just basically, young men, predominantly young men, like couple million young men. Had no experience. They're not engineers. They didn't, And meanwhile, the societies, these countries, these Western civilization countries are aging, so these people are retired. It's like me, I'm retired. I mean, I guess if someone gave me a call and asked me to help out with something, I would. That was something that could help the earth and people and something like that. But nobody's calling. Nobody's asking. They're just ignoring it. People are either absorbed in their smartphones or caught up in some kind of disease or, scared to death. Politics has become pop culture and like in the U.S., it's the cult of personality. Save America, build back better. Take your choice. Both of them are a joke. There is no U.S. It's a former U.S. and Western civilization has collapsed. Excuse me. So here we stand on the precipice of a near extinction event that gradually we will be seeing more and more of these things happening. Floods. I see there's some interesting stuff because see, everyone has a smartphone now. So there's like cameras, there's footage of all these things. I've seen land like in India, starting to rise. There's been an uptick in volcanic activity. What does that have to do with global warming, right? And CO2, right? Nothing. Right? South Atlantic anomaly, right? Our magnetic field is very weak. If you go out at 9:30, and I may do that today, because I didn't do the weather today on this show. I don't know if I'm really going to do it. Let's just do a quick look, just because I'm curious myself.
The Weather Watch forecast.
All right, the Weather Watch forecast. Well, where I am, my neck of the woods, it's 64 degrees, and it's going to be sunny all day long. And it's going to get up to 84 degrees and overnight, 64. And tomorrow's going to be, then we dip into the high 70s for the upcoming weekend. And night times will be a little bit cooler. So, anyway, that's your...
The Weather Watch forecast.
That's for the Mid-Atlantic states. Like I said, I'm an hour from the one of the entrances to the Northern Appalachian Trail. East of the Ohio Valley. But, that forecast, give or take a few degrees, is pretty good for this whole part of the former United States, more or less. Because of the way weather patterns come. But anyway, this magnetic phenomenon, this thing, and remember I showed yesterday or the day before I talked about it. When I was talking about Antarctica and the North Pole. Yesterday was the North Pole. That the geographic North Pole and the magnetic North Pole are two different things. The magnetic North Pole has migrated away from the geographic North Pole, and the magnetic South Pole has literally left the continent of Antarctica, meaning that it's not like it's not even on the continent, let alone near the geographic South Pole. Now, if that doesn't say something to you about what's going on, I don't know what else I can tell you. And remember, I'm a guy who's been involved in expeditions to North Pole, South Pole, and to the Himalayas. All right. So I have more knowledge, photos and videos and audio recordings from expeditions than probably anyone on the planet, right? Literally. Because I worked for two different groups, and one was UN sanctioned and the other one was, both had, have records, world records and, whatever. So, one of the guys was knighted by the Queen. But for what that, however you want to take that. So back to this UFO thing. And how does this tie into this upcoming disaster? Now here's where we enter speculation. Okay. And I've got about a half hour to get this out to you. If I go that long. I don't know if I need to. So you can't deny the 12,000-year cycle anymore. All right? You might want to. You might wish to. You might pray. All right? But no, it's it's basically, it's set in stone. Okay? It happened 12,000 years ago. There's a shorter cycle. It's 6,000 years ago. They call that the Noah's flood and the global flood event. So, this happens to be the 6 and 12,000 year time. Okay. I mean, this is it. We're right on it. There's a couple of people that have pinpointed almost a date, within the next 20 years. But there are others saying, look, we're right in the middle of this right now. It could happen any day now. That's why I put that on my title card. All right. It's going to happen. And it's going to happen no later than, say, 20 years from now, approximately. But that's like wishful thinking. All right. Because, this type of clockwork over spans of time, when you talk about 12,000 years, you can't nail that down, to a few years, all right, to even a decade or so. We're right at 12,000 year spot. And this isn't like some 2012 Mayan calendar thing or Y2K or some other, hooey, all right? They were never backed up by any kind of archaeological, historical evidence, all right? Even, No, this is it. All the signs are there. The poles are migrating. The magnetic field is weakening. The sun is showing signs, all right? And other planets in the solar system are experiencing the same things as the Earth. All right? And the astrophysicists are aware of this. So it's not just a thing, okay? All right? It's like, some people here on planet Earth are talking about. And then you have these, so people are being like scared to death of catching a cold. All right. Scared to death. I mean, they're literally dying from it because they're scared to death. They're talking about locking people down more and, all of this stuff.
Your papers, please.
And the question is, I have two questions now. Like I say, this is where we get into a territory of what's going on. What's really going on? What's the motivation here? So, is what happened over the last year and a half, okay, a dry run for something that will happen this fall or within the next 6 months in order to take out most of the people who may be in some kind of state of panic as this situation grows and may cause problems for the ruling elite to get into their shelters in an orderly fashion. Okay? So you look at the floods in Europe, say, and in China, just as an example. So, these earth changes, which I've been talking about and involved with people for over 20 some years. These earth changes that are happening, that are all about this 12,000 year cycle. Okay, that's what they're based upon. Remember, the sun is the 800-pound gorilla that the UN, IPCC, and the Paris Accord, and the Davos Set, and World Economic Forum, and John Kerry's, and all those people, they're ignoring the 800-pound gorilla in the room. It's the sun. Like I said in a previous show, like Bill Clinton said, it's the economy, stupid. Yeah, it's the sun, stupid. All right? That's what's causing these earth changes. You know, like I said, 9:30 in the morning. I don't know how I finished that. You could go out right now because of the weakened magnetic field, and you get a sunburn or a suntan, depending on your skin tolerance, at 9:30 in the morning. You know, not 11 o'clock or noon or 1. You know, it's the magnetic field that prevents cosmic rays and solar rays from coming in to our planet. So we have all kinds of activities, and these things get into below the surface, and that's what's causing, you know, activity, you know, an uptick in volcanic activity, and it ultimately, and so we're going to be seeing, you know, the weather patterns, the jet streams, more and more of these dips in the jet stream. You know, there's no, it's not a CO2 thing, a 0.004 CO2 thing. These are because of disruptions in the magnetic field of the planet and solar activity. And we can see this on other planets, even the gas giants. All right. This is a solar system, you know, and in a sense, you know, it's all, you know, it's all interconnected. You know, there's a clockwork to it, kind of, but it's not a perfected clockwork in the sense of that it's down to the second. We're in this thing now, any day now. And so as more and more of these things happen, you know, these people who try to give excuses, and maybe they're just functionally illiterate, I don't know. That's the part, you know, I think a lot of people in the news media and a lot of low-level politicians and bureaucrats are just functionally illiterate. So they just bought into this whole, you know, CO2 thing, man-made, whatever. But they don't look back to like the Carrington event in the 1800s that took out telegraph lines and stuff like that. You know, they don't even know that, right? You would say that to somebody working in some office in DC or at Langley, right? You know, one of these places. And they're like, Carrington event, what? What's that? You know, some intern for John Kerry, or some people in the West Wing, they'd be like, what? What are you talking about? See, they don't know. Right? Elon Musk is putting up all these microwave, basically trying to nuke the planet worse with all these little satellites in low Earth orbit to give internet. When if he really wanted to use his money wisely, he'd be figuring out, you know, things that could save more people, perhaps, if that's even possible. I don't believe the government shelters will work because I think that they'll end up becoming lava tubes. They're discounting the idea of earthquakes beyond any imagination. Remember, when you go from a 6.0 to a 6.5 or a 6.5 to a 7.0, it's the magnitude of that earthquake isn't just a couple of points. It's like almost exponential. So when you see an incredible earthquake like, you know, what happened to cause the damage at Fukushima, the 9.1 or 9 or something. When you see something like that, well, imagine and knowing that if that were just a little bit strong, and that caused a tsunami, knowing that it's not, what happens when you have a 10, a 12, or a 20? And what happens when those things just keep shaking, keep happening? All right. And you have this, you know, magma, you know, and you're in an underground shelter. So it's either going to be filled with a lava tube or it's going to just be shaken, shake, rattle, and roll, man. People will be crushed and buried in those things, and then they're going to be covered with ice. And there's no guarantee. As far as I know, I don't think anybody won that DARPA thing yet. And what kind of world are they going to come out to? A frozen world? Are they going to be able to survive for like 100 years? There's only a couple of places on the planet that will be somewhat livable after the event, in other words, decades or so after the event. And most of them will be at the equator, but we're not exactly sure if we'll have the same equator after this event. That's uncertain. The Earth may do like a twist, a spinning, right? Tilt on its axis at some point, and it may go back to that point of, of where it is now. Some people there have been people that have studied that, because people have said, well, what about Antarctica? Why is the ice there seems to be older? And there's two different schools of thought in that. I didn't get exactly into that, but just briefly, one is that the temporary, you can't melt miles worth of the ice in just, if the Earth just decides to go sideways for 8 hours, right, and then gets back into position, that's not going to cause anything, right? The other one is that in certain instances the ice isn't as old as people think it is. I mean, we know that between 10,600 years ago and 12,000 years ago, like the Younger Dryas period, we know that there was massive amounts of ice over North America. Massive amounts. Right? So that the concept of a mile of ice is not something that, is that far-fetched. However, it's far-fetched to you if you never heard this or studied this. But that's the way it was. And that's how it was the last time, the last 12,000 years. All right. And like I say, we found these frozen woolly mammoths that had food, undigested food in their stomachs. They were flash frozen and buried in ice. So, all this evidence is out there. It's, it's not, there are people who want to question this thing, or people think this is science fiction or fear mongering or something weird like that, but it's not. This is straight ahead science. The peer-reviewed science papers are starting to come out with more and more information supporting this and going against a lot of this other stuff. It's just that the average news media reporter who was like born in the age of the smartphone and internet knows no other anything other than hearsay, right? Didn't live in a time when you had to literally research and read, books, encyclopedias, and documents. They're not aware of any of this stuff. I have in my library volumes of books that were written over, I have some books that, were actually over 100 some years, 100, 200 years old. But I have other books that were, that are decades old, or 60 years old, people have been writing about all these kinds of things for years, and about, the planet and anthropology, archaeology, astrophysics, things that, really deal with life on the planet Earth. So that's, this is the reality. Any day now, wake up, all right, to that. And all these other things are going to pale in comparison to this. And you want to take chances? I mean, You know, there's some thing between 97 or 99% of the people are going to survive, you know, these things that they're, wherever the heck it is, you know, I can't keep, you know, the thing that's scaring the crap out of people, you know, you're going to take, you know, the odds of something doing that. Or how about the end of the world as we know it? So that brings us to the end here to deal with the UFO phenomenon in this recent announcement of UFOs, which I began this thing about. So why has the government decided to talk about UFOs now? And does that play into any of this stuff? All right. And you know, and let's just look, because the answer to these questions, you would have to be, you know, sitting in one of those Davos meetings or one of those meetings in the Pentagon or, you know, wherever. You know, places and organizations that we don't even know about. You know, some DIA meeting, not CIA. But so you have this release of information that there's technologies that are clearly off-world technologies or technologies from a civilization far beyond the known physics of of the earthly civilizations. It's very doubtful that the Russians have created these craft. It's very doubtful that the Chinese have created these craft. Right. And if they have, it's, you know, they might as well just call for the surrender of the United States. I guess that, you know, if that were the case, that it would be the possibility, right? It's more likely that, as we know, that UFOs exist and have existed, that these could well be people that are looking at the 12,000-year cycles. And one of two things. A, they're literally tourists from advanced civilizations studying this thing. You know, not so much in some, you know, sick way of watching a planet and 8 billion people be destroyed, killed off. Now, I don't think necessarily that would be the case. It's possible in a remote way. But it's more likely that they realize the inevitability of it, and it could be scientific study to watch to see this phenomenon occur. Right? And I guess in a remote way that people would hope would be that these would be some kind of, you know, advanced, highly advanced civilization, and they be making their self known, or already have made their self known, perhaps. And they're going to try to offset this thing some way, shape, or form. You know, I had a theory about previous civilizations tried to build obelisks in the original pyramid, and that they thought that they could use, like, in a way, Tesla, you know, believed in, you know, the way he saw energy and the energy that could be drawn from the ether or the planet, whatever. And perhaps they thought they could boost the magnetic field by having these various obelisks and various things, and they could almost create kind of a force field or force shield against this sun, right? This shell that the sun, when it novas, that it basically shoots towards the earth and causes most of the destruction. Or, somehow, compensate for our magnetic field loss and prevent that. And perhaps some highly advanced race could come to the rescue, perhaps already, so that this would be the movie version, But clearly, it doesn't really seem that that's going to be the case. So my takeaway from this recent announcement is that it's perhaps just leaked information that happened from people, and there was nothing they can do about it because, like any of these whistleblower political type of things, they couldn't deny it. Right. And that they know there's other stuff out there, and they figured if they denied it, they would even lose more credibility. And I think that the whole system, the corporatocracy, is such a clusterfuck. And it's, I have to use that word because it really is. That they don't know what they're doing. And so, we'll continue this conversation and come up with different ideas and possibilities if these two things are connected. The announcement of the UFOs being real and the cyclical 12,000 year near extinction event that's upon us at this point. It could happen any day now. And then all the rest of that stuff, well, we just don't know. We just don't know. We don't know why they're tormenting people, and scaring the crap out of people. No, it just doesn't make sense. And so what are we supposed to do? We just have to do the best we can and live our lives the best we can and survive. And if we have 20 years, live those 20 years the best we can. And why would these narcissistic sociopaths, well, they must be narcissistic sociopaths and psychopaths, would they be tormenting the people on the planet if we only have 20 years left? Like, why wouldn't they just let us have like a kind of semi-golden age in a sense of like leaving us alone and let us live our last years out? It's like when an elderly person or a pet that's ill, you want to comfort that person and let that person have the best they can. The last days to be the best they can. But instead, these sickos seem to be making the last days on Earth to be the worst possible. And that's the part that really like blows my mind. Right? And shows the type of individual these people. They actually, I honestly believe they think they can survive. They are so caught up in this idea of this power and greed and ruling, the ruling elite that they think they are, that they think they are more powerful than the sun. They don't even understand. Like I say, I don't believe they actually realize this, or take it serious. I think they semi-take it serious, and they have some shelters and stuff like that, right? But they have no idea of what it really is. And that's clear from guys like, Elon Musk, for example. And, that this life goes on. Let's just make, let's get 5G to people out in, out in the sticks, which is basically, nuking them, like putting people in a microwave, turning the earth into a microwave oven. They're just ignoring this. Let's make, let's do this, let's do that. So, there's always a possibility that we could dodge a bullet, as they say. Yeah. Like I say, probability is high that any day now, this title card is going to be nothing compared to what's really going to happen. We're talking about a tsunami. When an ocean pours over a continent, you're talking about like a mile-high wave. This is inconceivable. The way, the level of destruction is beyond anything you could imagine. You've seen the destruction that small tsunamis have caused, right? Well, imagine like a mile-high tsunami. You can't, it's incomprehensible. And so, there you have it. Something that very few people are talking about, but those who are talking about have volumes and volumes of evidence that probability is high that this will happen any day now. And meanwhile, you have government trying to get people to lock down, and do all this weird stuff. And you have people talking about, well, UFOs are real and we've known about it. It's like the world is upside down, and then people talking about trying to like blame everything on like CO2 as if it's like your fault. Because that's really what they're saying. It's the blame game. Well, it's your fault, man. Those floods are your fault. You shouldn't have done this, or you shouldn't have drove a car. You shouldn't have used a lawnmower. Well, I don't think anybody should use a lawnmower. Against that. But none of this is your fault. This is just the grand cycles of how this universe we live in works, and particularly our solar system. And whatever these UFOs are doing and have been doing here, who knows? Have they been, have they abductions? Have they been taking people to preserve certain people of humanity to, in some futuristic way, moving them to another planet, or putting them in some kind of suspended animation, whatever sci-fi thing you want to think of, so that when the planet finally comes back to a livable thing, maybe a century or more after this, or centuries, right? Could be a millennia. What happened between 10,600 years ago and 12,000 years ago, that's a pretty long time. So, we don't know. And these are questions that, should be talked about, should be asked, and the greatest minds should be working on. And instead, they're all fighting amongst themselves. It's like AI, it's like they won't come together. One AI won't share its AI with another. So that it's like each one has its fallacies and its imperfections. But if they combined them, you know, we would have excellent voice assistants and all kinds of neat things. It's like with our computer technology and stuff. Because of this clouds and competitions among these various companies and fear and patent, you know, the patent wars, it's like our computers are slower and, you know, we have bloatware, and my G5, you know, from a decade or more, 15 years ago, works better than my most recent computer that I'm using right now. Well, anyway, that's pretty much it, you know, for today's show. I think it's fascinating. I think you should do your own research into it. Life is life, you know. These are things. This is what's going on out there. And those of us who have been studying this stuff for decades know that we're reaching that time. So best of luck. You know, I'll continue doing this stuff and we'll explore this, you know, along the way. But there's a lot of mysterious things going on right now when it comes to the story that we're being told versus the reality that exists. And the question is, there's a big question is why? You know, maybe we'll ask that question tomorrow. Maybe we'll get into why. Or at least at the very least, it's something you should be starting to ask. Why are they doing this? Like I brought up in other things, like a child would ask, why? Then you give them an answer and they say, but why? And then you give them another answer and they're still, but why? And that's how it seems right now. It's like, why? You know, why are they doing this? You know, like the other one, why are you doing this to me? Take care. Have a great Tuesday. It's about 9:00 Eastern Standard Time. So I'm going to get on with my day. Take care. Cheers. Visit my site, TonyCaravanLive.com. You can get there by Rockflux.com now too.